Lawrence Still here. Welcome back to High Intensity Business, the podcast where we discuss high intensity strength training and provide you with the tools, the tactics, and the strategies to help you grow your strength training business. If you prefer to read, you can download the PDF transcript for this episode over on the blog post at highintensitybusiness.com. The episode number is 364. This is part 2 to designing exercise machines for Arthur Jones, Nautilus, MedX, LifeFitness, and Exerbotics with Clay Steffi. Clay was born in Kissimmee, Florida in 1947. He has a degree in mathematics from the University of South Florida. Clay started working with Arthur Jones and designing machines at Nautilus around 1980. He then went on to help Arthur at MedX in 1987. And since then, Clay has worked for LifeFitness and more recently Exerbotics and now Imagine Strength. Clay, welcome back to the podcast. Great to speak to you again.
Hello, how's everybody doing?
Everybody is just fine. And it's great to connect again and get to talk to you. So when we last spoke, we kind of did a bit of a career timeline. That was the main focus of the podcast. And we had a few audio issues and distractions. So we decided to cut that one a little bit short and do a part 2 and kind of finish what we started. And kind of where we got to with that podcast is we were talking about the machines you helped design at MedX, which was really interesting. And I just wondered if we could just carry on from there. So would you be able to just talk to us about some of the machines you designed for MedX or helped design?
Well, when we started, we had basically 4 people. And I was the only designer. We had Kathleen, my wife. She handled all the purchasing and things of that ilk. She's a senior corporate accountant. And we had another person that started at the same time that came over from Nautilus with us. Actually, a couple of them came over from Nautilus and helped the design, helped with the factory. We started out, Arthur had purchased a horse farm in Ocala, Florida. And the horse farm had a horse bus building that they kept the horse bus stored in. It was 60 foot by 60 foot, 2 stories high. The bottom had a 15-foot wide section and a 45-foot wide section. And we put our design and office into the 15-foot wide section and a prototype shop in the 45 by 60 section. It also had a second floor, and the second floor was divided into 3 equal 20 by 60 units. And the center unit was finished as an apartment. And Arthur had a deputy sheriff was living there, and he had let the deputy sheriff live there for free. And it gave him, some extra security for his property. And Kathleen and I moved into the section, the apartment that was directly above the office. And we started MedX with the idea that we were going to farm out the manufacturing. So we contacted some outfits, one outfit in Chicago. They manufactured a number of things. Among others, they manufactured filters. I don't remember what the name of the company was now, but we sent them, we designed the first lumbar machine and sent that up to Chicago to have them build it. They built it, put it together, and sent it back down to us, and it didn't work very well. And so we got to checking, and their quality of manufacturing was just not there. So Arthur said, well, I guess we'll have to manufacture them ourselves. So we added one of these little portable buildings out behind the building that we were in. It was just big enough for painting the machines. And so the prototype shop became a combination prototype / production shop. And so the first lumbar machines that went to customers were built in that prototype shop. He had a
Did you build those? Were you actually responsible for designing and manufacturing, building them as well?
Well, mostly I did design. I did participate in prototyping and building, depending on what I was doing at the time. If I had the time, I would go out in the shop and drill holes or whatever, run the saw. I'm not a machinist, but I can do a certain amount of limited stuff on a mill or lathe or coal saw or bandsaw or whatever, and a little bit of welding. But I tried to leave the actual manufacturing to the people who were really formally trained for that. And we had we had several really good people who could put stuff together, manufacture parts and everything to a very high degree. So anyway, we first customer machines that went out were just built in that facility, and he had a hay barn that was adjacent to this horse bus barn, I guess. And eventually it did not have a concrete floor. It was basically a pole barn. And we went out and put a concrete floor in it and walls, because it was basically an open structure with a roof. But we put the walls up, put the floor down, and added to our production capacity. And later on, we added some more buildings behind that became more of a production facility, bigger and bigger production facility. And we kept adding buildings. I guess the last building that we added was 225 feet long by 150 foot wide. And somewhere along the line, after I guess I had been there about 11 years, my wife, Kathleen, wanted to go back to school. So I said, okay, fine, we got you pretty much covered. And she went back to the University of Florida and got her accounting degree. And while she was there, Arthur sold MedX. And so we had new management at MedX, and I was a legacy employee. And the guy that took over running MedX was a guy named Larry Evans. And he was a real good guy. And I think the first year he was there, he was actually doing quite well, showing a profit, whatever. He hired an accountant whose name escapes me at the moment. Jack LaMattina, yeah. His name was Jack LaMattina. That was my wife. She remembers him.
She's there to help.
Well, he was there for a little while, and he had a Vietnamese girlfriend, I guess that he had to, spend a lot of money on to keep her happy. So he started embezzling money from MedX.
Uh-huh.
And Larry Evans caught on to that after about 4 or 5 months or something, and was preparing to go to the new owners, but Jack LaMattina beat him to it. He went to the new owners and accused Larry of taking money out of the company, so they fired Larry. And a new guy who'd actually been there, he was on the computer side, developing the computer programs for running the medical machines. And he was a little bit crooked also, and he lasted about 3 or 4 years, and they finally escorted him off the premises. The sheriff came and escorted him off. By that time, I was long gone because that guy, they had this was about the same time that LifeFitness purchased Hammer Strength. And Gary Jones, Arthur's son, was the one that started Hammer Strength. And Gary is very smart and very creative and very clever, and made Hammer Strength extremely successful. And it had reached a point where he felt like it needed professional management or something, which, as it turned out, was probably a mistake. But LifeFitness, I think Gary engineered the sale of Hammer to LifeFitness. And when he sold Hammer had a number of sales guys who had regions. And one of the regions, the Western region or Northwest, I'm not sure which, was run by a guy named Tom Grace. And LifeFitness purchased Hammer and immediately did away with all the contracts with all the franchise owners. And Tom Grace was not too fond of that. So he contacted MedX, and MedX was looking for good salespeople. So they got together, and he said, "Look, I'll come be a salesman for MedX. In return I want you to come out with a line of plate-loaded equipment to compete with Hammer." Well, I found out about that, and me being the laid-back, quiet guy that I am, I started raising hell. I said, "You have got to be absolutely insane to try to compete with Hammer Strength. There's no friggin' way you're going to be able to do that." And so the next thing that happened was they moved me outside the company and made me an outside subcontractor. So, I've been there at that point for 10 or 11 years, and I wasn't too happy with that. But I said, okay. So Kathleen was still going to school. We had a house, 6 or 8 miles away from the plant. And so I set my computer up in the new house and worked from home. And Gary found out that my situation. So he started calling me up, asking me to come work for him.
Yeah.
And first it was once a month, he'd give me a call. Then it was once every 2 weeks. Then it was every week. Then it was every day. Then it was twice a day.
And so you went through this on the first podcast, Clay. So this was, you went to work for, yeah, it's okay. You went to work with him at LifeFitness.
Yes.
For like 11 years after that, right?
Correct.
So And then you came back to MedX after that, and it was under different ownership. I'd like to fast forward if that's okay, because just we covered some of this in the last podcast.
Sure.
Yeah. So you came back to MedX. Now the question I had for you, actually, we can get into machines in a bit, specific machines, but I'd love to. You last time we spoke, you mentioned how MedX had a huge problem because machines weren't profitable. They weren't covering their own overhead. And then when you went to Arthur, I don't know. Actually, this may have been. Forgive me. This might have been the first time you were at MedX. So this might be the first time, but I believe that you weren't charging enough money for the machines, and it just didn't make sense to you, and that's why the business struggled. Or yeah. Now, is that when you came back to MedX? Was that problem? Was that the reason the business failed? Or I'm just curious, why did it fail when you came back? What were the reasons?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. You said why did the company do what?
So when you came, because you came back to MedX, right, after LifeFitness?
Yes.
Yeah. And then what happened then? So what happened to the business then in terms of performance and that kind of thing?
Well, they had changed hands several times. So when I went back, they had new owners who have since sold it again. And I was unemployed, so I was looking around for a job. And so they said, well, would you like to come back and work for us as factory manager? And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. And which we did. We moved. We were still living in Kentucky. Now, I didn't feel real secure about the situation, so we did not sell our house in Kentucky. We moved back down to Florida, and Larry Evans had a house on the north end of the runway that Arthur built. He was living in Orlando at the time, and what I had told them was, I'll be happy to come back to MedX if you bring Larry Evans back at the same time, because in my opinion, he's the only guy that I know that can actually make the thing profitable. And they did. They hired him back also, because they were basically going down the tube, I guess. So Larry and I came back at the same time. He continued to live in Orlando, and he was gracious enough to allow Kathleen and myself to move into his house on the north end of the runway. So that was very, very convenient for me. And of course, I was, quote, factory manager, unquote. So I went in and started trying to implement a lot of the stuff that I had learned at Hammer as far as how to run a factory. And at the same time, going back and checking all the drawings and the designs that were being currently manufactured. I really hadn't designed anything new since I had left the first time. But anyway, I was there for about a year. I think Larry was there for about 6 months or something. He kind of threw up his hand and said, "This ain't working." And he went
Why?
on to do
Why wasn't
else.
it working? What happened?
Well, I don't know what was going on his end. We never really, he never really got into detail with me. I think that he was banging heads with the owners. He wanted him to do X and he wanted to do Y. And basically, he ran out of patience. And as I say, I lasted about another 4 or 5 months after he did. And then they quit meeting payroll. They just stopped paying everybody. And the people who were in the factory, a lot of them had been there. They were folks that I had originally hired almost 20 years previously. Been there, for 20 years. And a lot of the old timers there said, "Well, we'll be willing to work without a paycheck for
Wow.
a limited amount of time." And a month went by, and they still weren't making payroll, and I wasn't getting paid either. So I got a call from a guy that I had worked with at LifeFitness, who had become the president of Exerbotics. And he said, "Would you please come to work for me?" I said, "Okay." So we, Kathleen and I moved back to Kentucky, and I flew out to Tulsa, where the Exerbotics company was, and
Clay, before
started.
I want to learn about Exerbotics. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm really interested in MedX and why the business has never really seemed to have recovered. It seems, you know, way I understand it, and my understanding is probably not completely accurate, is Nautilus was really successful, and Arthur and the team made a lot of money. And MedX, the machines are incredible, and coveted around the world. I suppose mostly by a niche industry, strength training studios for the most part. And yet the business has always struggled, and I believe I don't know where it's at now, but it's not, the way I understand it is it's not in a very healthy position. And yet these are unbelievable machines. I mean, we have them in our studio. We love them. Whenever we're buying machines, we're always looking to see if we can get a MedX version of a particular movement. In fact, we're literally just about to place an order for 5 machines out of Germany. So can you just explain to me why this business has really struggled since the time you were last there, and since they were struggling to meet payroll? Like, why? Do you know?
Well, Arthur started out, he basically had a 9th grade education. He was not a businessman. Arthur was a showman. He was, almost like a carnival barker. He was had a lot of, life experience.
Yeah, but MedX had changed hands a bunch of times since Arthur, and no one could make it work, it seems.
Correct. Well, I was always on the engineering end. I was not on the business end. But just before I left MedX the first time, before Arthur sold the company, we started out building medical machines, and that's all we did. And then I thought we were, doing okay. I thought that the medical machines were profitable, and but I didn't know for sure, because I didn't have visibility of what was going out, what it was costing.
This is it. So let me just jog your memory. So in part 1, you said how you investigated all the costs, right? Yes. So you looked into, I'm guessing that's where you were going with this, right? Is you looked into what is the cost, what's the overhead for each machine. You then presented that to Arthur. I think you said Arthur presented that to Jim Flanagan or some other salespeople, and they said, well, we can't increase the prices because they won't sell. And that's where we got to, right? So
well, my point was, who do you listen to? Do you listen to the guy that's building the machines for you?
Yeah.
Or do you listen to the people who are selling machines and are afraid that if you raise the price, you're going to hurt their income because they won't be able to sell as many machines? And that was, where Arthur made a big mistake. He listened to Jim Flanagan. Flanagan told him, said, "Oh, we can't raise the price. We won't be able to sell as many machines." Well, it's like, okay, you're going to continue to send machines out the door with $100 bills plastered all over them, because that's essentially what you're doing, They're costing you more to manufacture than what you're getting from them when you sell them. And so we needed to raise the price. Now, if you could not sell them at an increased price where they actually made a profit, then maybe you shouldn't be in business in the first place.
I would agree with that. So is that the problem? Is that what happened? So that just, despite the change in management and potentially the change in strategy, no one overcame that, and that's how it fell apart. Or are you privy to other reasons for why MedX never seemed to recover?
Well, yes, I believe that nobody has ever been able to, build the machines at a price point where you could actually make, some income by, selling them at a price that people are willing to afford. Now, if we had doubled the price on the machines at that particular point in time, then maybe would have started showing a reason.
Is that how much you needed to increase the prices by? You needed to double them. Was that necessary at the time?
I don't really know because, as I say, I did not have visibility of all the costs.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to turn anyone into a villain here or make this political. I'm just very curious as to why this business that develops such great machines has never seemed to have become successful.
Well, the other part of it was, as I say, they charged enough for the machines, and of course Arthur was not the least bit shy about spending money. He went through a lot of airplanes while I was at MedX. He had 3 707s at one point when I was there.
Did you factor that into the expenses for each machine? I'm kidding.
I did not, because I didn't know what, I never had visibility of what he paid for those planes.
Yeah, of course.
So,
thank you for that. And sorry for cutting you off. Before we get into stuff about Exerbotics, can you talk to us about some of the machines that you helped design at MedX? Some of your favorites, maybe? I'd love to hear your favorites, maybe those that are a little bit underrated, in your opinion.
Oh, we did a bunch of machines. I couldn't put a number on it now. 30 machines, 40 machines, something. But I mean, we did, for as far as the medical machines, probably my all-time favorite was the lumbar machine, because I think it really helped folks who were in rehab and did wonders for their backs. And I was involved a fair amount in the testing of the machines, where we were gathering data to see what kind of response people got from being on the machine. So I got exposed to folks that I really feel sorry for, because their backs were in such terrible condition. But almost without exception, everybody that we put through a rehab program at the farm in Ocala all came out much better.
Wow.
So I think
was this the medical version or the standard MedX lumbar? Because we have the non-medical, which I love, but I know the medical's even way better.
Well, it was the medical machine, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And the medical machine has some functionality that the exercise version does not. Primarily the adjustable counterweights for torso mass. So if you were able to adjust for the torso mass, you can literally put somebody in the machine with zero resistance and just have them go through the motion just to, free up their back to start. So you can start them with practically zero resistance. And we could do that anyway we had compound weight stacks on them with the lumbar. Boy, I don't remember. I think it had like a 4-inch stroke. So you were lifting, and Arthur's reasoning for doing that was to eliminate momentum, because if you can only lift the weight 4 inches, you can't build up much speed. And he felt like, momentum could be, when you were training a physically challenged subject, that momentum could cause harm. And if you got to moving pretty fast, because that's the tendency with people who are unsupervised, as they start to move faster and faster and start to throw the weight. And they do that because they can use more weight. And people get caught up in trying to demonstrate strength instead of actually training. So that's one of the things you have to deal with.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And it's something that we talk about when we are talking to clients about the sophistication of the MedX. We talk about the travel, the weight travel, and the effect that has on momentum. Any other machines that come to mind that you really like, or that you feel are underappreciated, which come to mind for you?
Oh, not really. Each machine was designed for a specific purpose. And so if you were going to rehab somebody, then obviously you'd want to use one of the rehab machines. But for the general population, just to increase strength, you have to use quite a number of machines to, exercise all the muscles. And so I don't really have any favorites. It's been a long time since I've actually
I'm really testing your memory.
A MedX workout. When I first moved from Kentucky back to Florida this last time, after I had recovered from my broken neck, I went back to Joe Cerulli's Gainesville Health and Fitness.
Beautiful.
And he has a full line of MedX stuff, and I was doing a workout with, I don't remember, 12 or 14 MedX machines, and I think that helped me a lot on my way to getting back to some semblance of where I was before. And at the time, it was very educational for me, and quite humorous at times when I'd get on a machine and perform an exercise in what I knew to be the correct fashion. And a little old lady would come up to me and say, "You don't do it like that."
No way.
And I say, "Well, how should I be doing it?" And she proceeded to tell me.
So wow, she didn't know you played a role in designing the machines. Go on. That's hilarious. And what were you doing? Can you remember exactly what machine that was and how you were performing? I'd love to know the details of that, like how you were doing it and what.
It was the exercise abdominal machine.
Got it.
Now the exercise abdominal is a difficult machine to do correctly, and of course it's related to the back, because the bones that you're articulating the spine. So you have essentially a multitude of axes of rotation. So the movement's a little bit complex. And, I got a patent for designing a work arm, an Exerbotics work arm. The Exerbotics back abdominal machine has a quite simple solution for that by making the pad rotate independently from the work arm, so that it tracks the body as opposed to forcing the body into a certain path. It and it's a big improvement on a, because if I go back and look at the lumbar machine from day one, that was one of our problems that we had in designing the thing was, okay, where do we put the axis of rotation for that movement? And we ended up putting the axis, behind the rear roller pad, behind your back. And, but I was never really satisfied with that. It didn't seem to me that it really tracked the body movement that well. And I thought it took me, I came up with the idea for the Exerbotics machine after I had gone to work for Exerbotics. I'd been thinking about it for 30 years and finally came up with a simple, effective solution for that movement. And we did the Exerbotics back machine, back ab, and everybody says that wow, that's a great movement, and so it's everybody who has a back moves their back at a little bit different than everybody else, but the machine accommodates that because the axis is actually floating. So the axis moves as you move. And so it's a very, very effective machine. And I've got a guy that I worked with. I went to work for what was the name of that company? I went to work down in Louisiana and met a guy named Thor Swanson, and he had actually worked at LifeFitness for a while, same time I was there, but I didn't get to know him while I was there. He was in Chicago while I was in Kentucky. And anyway, he had come up with a solution for leg extension where some people were experiencing discomfort in their knees when they were doing the leg extension movement. And he had taken 2 spur gears and put them in the machine in the work arm with their axes parallel to the axis of rotation of the knee. And so that as the work arm rotated, it rolled around these spur gears, which was, in a sense, a moving axis of rotation. And he built a prototype and put it into a facility down in not New Orleans, next one over, whatever. And apparently was getting good feedback from that. And he's a little bit of a odd duck. He is working for. He's an engineer. He was a Navy SEAL and got out of military, and I don't know all the details of his education and everything, but he became an engineer and went to work for Body Masters. That was the name of the company. Body Master was a company in Louisiana that built exercise equipment. They had shut down, and then the company bought the facility, and the company made oil well equipment, and they retained a number of the engineers who worked at Body Masters originally, and including him, and they talked this company that had purchased Body Master. They talked them into trying to resurrect Body Masters. So anyway, I met him there and have maintained contact with him, and he has a clever little thing for moving axis. We incorporated into the Imagine Strength leg extension and leg curl.
Mm.
And we may incorporate it in some other stuff. So anyway,
Very
we got
cool.
about 20 minutes left before my wife has a meeting coming up.
Got it. Yeah.
So what's
So
next?
got a couple more questions. Very aware of time, so don't worry. I'd just love to hear your view on exercise machines today. So, you know, a lot of people in our space, people have great respect for Nautilus and MedX machines and what makes them great, you know, or the machines you're producing at Imagine Strength, you know, that they compare those to a lot of the other machines on the market today, and they just don't seem to have any comparison, right? It seems to me that a lot of the lessons learned and a lot of the design that works so well with some of those machines doesn't seem to have been carried through to a lot of these other more modern machines. And I'm just curious why that is. And maybe you can educate us on what is different about the machines you've worked on and a lot of the kind of quote unquote mainstream exercise machines, particularly obviously in strength training.
Well, when Arthur started Nautilus, it wasn't too long before he started getting copycats, competition, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a competitor that came out, and I don't even remember the name of them now, but he sued him because they were using a cam in their machine and this, that, and the other. And the lawsuit went on for about 5 years, and he finally got tired of fooling with lawsuits, so he just bought the company and shut it down and took all the equipment back to to Nautilus in Virginia or what have you. And they had a cam, the number 25 cam, and you'd look at a leg extension, it had a number 25 cam. You'd look at a overhead press, and it had a number 25 cam. Or you look at whatever machine they had, the number 25 implied that they had at least 25 different cams, but they used the same cam on every machine. So they really knew what they were doing. And, I don't know how big a competitor were, but they were, just somebody that was trying to copy Nautilus and feed off of Nautilus's success. And the thing about Arthur was he was not driven by, he wanted to make a profit, sure, but he was driven much more by the engineering side. He wanted the perfect tool, as perfect as he could make it. And that was what he always strived for. So I thought that was a good philosophy. So I adopted that myself. I said, hey, let's make the machine so it comes as close to doing what we say it will do as possible. So that's the biggest thing, because everybody else says, oh, there's a bicep machine where you hook a cable to a pulley and drive a weight stack, and whoop-de-doo, off you go. Let's figure out the cheapest way to do it. And you get what you pay for.
But some of these machines that do just that and don't take it as seriously are expensive. So are you saying that the problem still exists today? It's the same problem? And they're just being...
You gotta look at who your customer is. Your customer is, for a lot of these companies, their customer is the exercise facility. And you got these chains of big facilities that they have hundreds of machines. And their approach is a customer comes in the door and says, "You guys have hammer equipment?" I said, "Oh, yeah, we got hammer equipment." I said, well, do you have LifeFitness? "Oh, yeah, we got LifeFitness." They buy, 8 or 10 machines of every brand. And then people can come in and, because, Gary had an interesting analogy on this. The reason that Hammer was successful, one of the reasons, they started out selling the machines to the high schools. Well, the high schools couldn't afford the selectorized machines with weight stacks. But with a Hammer machine, you just threw weight plates on the thing and used that for resistance. And they were incredibly smooth because they didn't have chain or strap or pulleys or this, that, and the other, creating friction. And so they started out in the high schools and had great success in the high schools. And the high schools that purchased Hammer Strength were able to have superior athletic teams. So what happens? Well, the high school kids graduate, they go to college, and the ones that go into college sports, the first thing they do is they ask their coaches, "Where's the Hammer machines?" Mm-hmm. So then the colleges and universities start buying Hammer, and those guys go through 4 years of college or whatever, and then they get recruited by the pros. And the first thing they do when they go to the pro team is, "Where's the Hammer equipment?" So that's the way he grew the business.
Branding.
It was very, very successful. He had a product that was very inexpensive relative to selectorized equipment and worked very well. And Gary, learned a lot from his father about, muscle function and what kind of resistance profile you needed and so on and so forth. So, his machines were productive. And consequence, he had a low-cost machine that was very productive, and he was very successful with it. And, that's why LifeFitness was attracted to buying Hammer Strength. And I had an interesting conversation. It's another piece of the puzzle, whatever. And LifeFitness had a product manager. Actually, he's a senior vice president now or something, named Greg Highsmith. And he was in charge of all the strength stuff. And we had a long discussion one day about strength and strength curves and this, that, and the other, cams, whatnot. And he said, "I don't care about strength curves. All I care about is, does it feel good?" Well, that's a big thing, because if you put two machines side by side, one with what I would call a correct resistance profile and one without a correct resistance profile, they can feel quite a bit different. And one thing I ran into it specifically with leg curl machine. The leg curl machine, the pro leg curl machine Nautilus built. I'd worked when I was in Lake Helen, Florida, running a prototype shop there. We had a little gym set up. And one of the things we had was pro leg curl. I get on that thing, and I got up to where I was using about 95 pounds. And for about 3 months, I went, and I could not make any progress. I couldn't get any stronger. I kept hitting the sticking point halfway through the movement. So one day I said, well, how about I design a cam that falls off before I hit that sticking point and see what happens? Because my theory was that if a resistance profile was correct, that you're going to exercise to failure, the point that you fail should be random throughout the range of motion.
Mm.
And so I designed a cam, had like a 3-to-1 fall off. It was hard at the start and fell off as you contracted your muscle. And as the muscle contracts, you build up, you're compressing the muscle more and more. So more and more your strength is going into just compressing the muscle. So obviously, you're going to have less strength left over to actually lift the weight. So put this cam on there, and within about a month, I had gone from maxing out at 95 pounds of resistance. I had gone up to about 180. I had doubled my strength in 1 month by changing the cam. Said, well, maybe I'm on to something. Well, I talked about this to Arthur, and we changed the cam on the leg curl. And then we did a leg extension cam, and he said, okay, take this cam, go up to Virginia, have them put this cam on the leg extension machine. I said, okay. So at that time, the engineer in charge, we put the cam that Arthur and I had designed on the leg extension machine, and you get on the machine and do the exercise, and right at the very end, it falls off quite a bit. And it felt like, and the hammer machine was like this also, it felt like you were about to go over backwards, or you're going to, the work arm was going to come up and hit you in the face. So I said, well, that ain't right. He said that. I didn't say that. So he took the cam out and went over to bandsaw and changed the profile on that cam with a bandsaw. Stuck it back in the machine. Oh, that feels much better. Well, I told Arthur about that. And the guy who was running prototype at Nautilus got fired. And that's where I got promoted to, head of engineering, I guess. I felt bad about that, but I also felt that Arthur needed to know what people were doing.
Absolutely.
They were changing stuff behind his back without telling him, based on, their own personal opinion. And I said, I don't think that's right. So anyway, just to give you some examples of things that go on that happen.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Clay, I'm just want to be respectful of your time. And obviously, there's just a couple of things I want to touch on. So before we wrap up, can you just talk about the project you're involved in now, Imagine Strength? And we'll put all the links in the blog post for this, and just describe to people what you're doing there. So it's all very exciting, and how people can get in touch.
Well, what I'm doing is I'm kind of, sort of, basically taking MedX machines and taking what I have learned over the years and applying what I have learned and know to a MedX machine and improving it and calling it an Imagine machine. One of the things that I've done is, Arthur, all the MedX machines have 12-inch stroke, which means the weights move a distance of 12 inches if you do the full range of motion. Well, his idea was to reduce momentum. Well, that's okay. I agree with that. but I just felt that he took it maybe a little bit too far because, excuse me, to give you an example, if you do 100 pounds and you lifted a foot, that's 100 foot-pounds of work. And I felt that was, you could still get pretty low momentum, but you could save some steel by increasing the stroke a little bit. So in the Imagine machines, incorporated an 18-inch stroke, foot and a half. So if you lift 100 pounds, a foot and a half, that's 150 foot-pounds. So you get more resistance using the same amount of weight, more available resistance. And if you're doing the exercise correctly, which means doing it in a controlled, not too fast fashion, momentum's not a factor. So
yeah,
that's one improvement. My wife is holding up three fingers at me. So
well, look, maybe if you don't mind, I can jump in here. So worth saying that, the website is imaginestrength.com. Relatively new business, right? So people need to be patient. If they contact you or Jeff Turner with their interest, obviously, like I said, I don't want this to be like a Kiss of Death podcast where tons of people from our niche get in touch. But I think you can go to the website and you can obviously subscribe with your email address and just keep tabs on what's happening there. Because I think it's fair to say that if lots of businesses try to order, it would be a bit of a problem right now, right, Clay?
Yes.
So, yeah, okay, yeah.
So, I mean, if they want to contact me, I'm perfectly happy to talk to folks. But anything that has to do with ordering a machine, I turn that over to Jeff. So, do you want any of my contact information, or?
Yeah, well, obviously you've got contact details. So I'll have your contact details, Clay, on the actual blog post for the podcast. And I'll have all the details. So people can go to imaginestrength.com and they can see the telephone number there and Jeff's email address if they want to learn more as well. So very exciting. I'm really excited what you guys are doing. And I can't wait to see how the business develops. And Clay, for everyone, is there any other parting thoughts, or are we good to wrap up?
Well, do you want to do this again in the future?
Absolutely, Clay.
Well, talk to you next time.
I'll email you immediately after this. And for everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode and download the transcript PDF to read, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 364. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.